this morning's Business Insight, Delta Airlines is again cutting or reducing the frequency of flights to more than a dozen cities from Cincinnati, Northern Kentucky International Airport. Delta's peak day departures from CVG will drop from 107 to 86, and it will fly to 36 cities. The changes are part of Delta's switch away from fuel-inefficient 50-seat regional aircraft to larger ones. So far in 2015, Delta has ended service from CVG to San Diego, New Orleans, Fort Myers, and Jacksonville, Florida, and Madison, Wisconsin. Does this mean CVG's status as the sixth largest Delta hub is in jeopardy? Business Courier reporter Chris Wetterick took a deep dive into this story and what it means for travelers. He's with editor Rob Dawmeyer in the studio. Gentlemen.
Thanks very much. And Chris, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Seems like it's the same old song for Delta over the last 4, 5, 6 years. But why now? Why are they reducing flights now?
Well, there's a couple of reasons. One is, well, the main reason is that they're trying to get rid of these 50, not get rid of, but reduce the number of 50-seat regional jets they are using. Those are not very fuel efficient. They're expensive to fly. It's not like the heyday of Comair when they could, use these jets and fly to every little city in the country and do it for cheap because gas or oil was $20 a barrel. They can't do that anymore, so they need to phase these jets out, use bigger jets that are more profitable to do. They also have some crewing issues, related to those 50-seat jets. There's basically not enough people to staff all of these airports with these jets. So those are the two main reasons for this happening.
So we're still considered a hub for Delta. Now, once upon a time, CBG was Delta's second largest hub, just behind Atlanta, which is where Delta's based. Now we're the smallest hub.
Right.
Some would even be surprised that we're still considered a hub, but we are.
Yeah.
But what's the future of Cincinnati as a hub status, and why? And is it even important to be a hub?
Well, I think the business community thinks it's important because they can still get to a lot of these cities that Cincinnati wouldn't have. I mean, you look at United, you look at American, they fly out of Cincinnati, but they only fly to their hub cities, right. In Houston or Chicago or whatever. If Delta de-hubbed Cincinnati, we would kind of be facing the same situation. They would fly to Atlanta, they would fly to Salt Lake City, they would fly to Detroit. But they wouldn't fly to some of these destinations like Richmond, Virginia, that where the flights are being reduced. So we are still a hub. We're still going to places we wouldn't have otherwise. Whether I don't think anybody would be surprised if we were de-hubbed in the future, but Delta officials and CVG officials emphasize that is not what's happening. That's not why these changes were made.
Now, you took a look at some ticket prices and flights recently when you were doing this story. What are some of the things that you saw?
Right, we tried to look at the practical effect of this on the business traveler, and what we found was actually that a lot of these cities rebounded later in the year. We looked at 4 different weeks throughout the period of the year, throughout the seasons. We found in November that the number of flights available for sale went back up. Now that can change. Just like the airline prices, they fluctuate, pretty rapidly. But I think there is some hope that that some of these rebound. Really, the cuts are centered around the summer and in the low travel periods. We also found that, for instance, around July 4th, around Labor Day, there were basically no direct flights to a lot of these cities. So it seems like they're really, taking them out of the circulation when there's not a lot of business travel going on.
Right, so they really are focused on. I know there are a lot of business people in this town that have a ton of frequent flyer miles and are really big in this sort of medallion standing with them.
Yeah.
Last question for you: when Delta shrinks and shrinks, that opens up some gates and some flights for some other people. What's happening there?
Yeah, I mean, it's not so much in their particular part of the airport. They have a lease on that runs through 2020, but the airport has plenty of room for low-cost carriers like Allegiant and Frontier, which have come in and they've made an aggressive move at CVG. There's a lot of vacation destinations you can get to for relatively cheap now. I was on a flight to New Orleans last week. The plane was full, both going to Cincinnati and both going and coming from Cincinnati to New Orleans, so I think they're doing pretty well.
Well, that's great to hear. And once upon a time, Delta would just lower their prices and kick these airlines like Allegiant, Frontier out. That's not happening this time around.
It's not happening this time around, no. I mean, not yet anyway. It's interesting, the New Orleans flight, for instance, Delta ended its direct flights to New Orleans, and Allegiant has a twice-a-week flight. So it's not the same level of service. Delta used to fly to New Orleans every day.
Right.
But if you need to get to New Orleans for vacation, you can still do it.
You can still do it direct. Thank you very much for being here.
You're welcome.